Scarlet and Maize Season 2. I'm Adam. This is Zach. This season, I have to let you know, this episode, I should say, is sponsored by Lano Life. So Zach, this is a true story, I've never been excited about chicken broth in my life, except I was walking down the aisle at a grocery store and a box caught my eye. I looked, I thought, I want to buy this. I loved it so much, I was telling everybody I know, you need to try this bone broth.
You told me about it.
I reached out to Lano Life and said, I love your product. I have this show on YouTube. It's a podcast also. Will you please sponsor?
Super popular.
And they said, yes. They also said, only because of Hassan Haskins. They didn't say that part. But I love Lano Life. And you should too. They're at Meijer for sure. It might be at other stores.
Go check it out.
Go check it out. Lano Life. It's real good. Zach.
Yeah.
You wanted to talk about the AP poll.
The Associated Press.
In the Big Ten, Ohio State's number 2, Michigan's number 8, Michigan State 15, Wisconsin 18.
Honestly, for all four of those teams, I think they're ranked right where they should be. There's some teams that aren't in the Big Ten that I don't necessarily agree with. We won't necessarily get into that now. But I mean, Ohio State, clear cut, they bring back a ton. They're the number 2 team in the country. Almost every poll has them behind Alabama as the number 2 team in the country. Michigan, I think they'll be significantly worse than last year, although last year was their best season in 15 years.
And their schedule this year is
25 years.
easy.
That's what I was going to say. Their schedule's pretty easy, so I think they will finish in the top 10 long term.
Mm-hmm.
I think long term, by the end of the season, they will be close to around the 8th ranked spot. Michigan State won't finish as high. I think they ended up in the top 10 last year at the end of the season after the bowl win. I don't think they might reach the top 10, but lose a couple games. But I think 15 is a good ranking for them, losing Kenneth Walker and a few other key guys. Wisconsin is always solid all around, except for you just can't trust that quarterback. So I think 18 makes sense for them.
Yeah, no, I mainly agree. I don't think, honestly, so I think that Ohio State and Michigan, here, it's funny how I view things. I'm like, Ohio State and Michigan, that makes sense coming off of last year.
Yeah.
And what they have coming back.
Right.
I don't think Michigan State's going to end the season ranked. I don't think Wisconsin's going to end the season ranked.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the preseason poll is mainly based off of last season, unless you're Clemson. So, I don't know. I don't have any problems with any of it.
Clemson still won 10 games last year.
Mm-hmm.
They are in the worst conference as far as Power 5
Right.
conferences, but arguably.
Yeah. Well, so
not after this next year though, because then the two of the best Pac-12 teams are joining the Big Ten. But
right.
Anyway,
which of these 4 teams, Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, or Wisconsin, will drop the most by the end of the year?
When you said MSU and Wisconsin will both be unranked by the end of the season, I think.
So in that scenario, it would be Michigan State because they would have dropped 3 more spots.
That makes sense.
Just so we're on the same page.
I do think Michigan State might drop some, but I still think they'll be a ranked team by the end of the season. But I do not think Wisconsin will. If I had to pick one to drop, just because of the quarterback play, Peyton Thorne, Michigan, Ohio State, they all have quarterbacks coming back that played well, and so I think that's the difference there. Wisconsin.
You know, I don't know. We should have had a hot take segment, but we don't. I don't know if this is a hot take or not. I think, so Peyton Thorne has looked okay. I think that is almost equally on Jaden Reed, but Jaden Reed is back. Jaden Reed, right. I think, bailed him out a lot and made him look better than he is. But Jaden Reed, for some reason, came back.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, whether it was his weapons or not, they've had stellar quarterback play. He played well with the weapons he had.
I don't know about stellar, but they've had quarterback.
What about interstellar? Sorry.
What about that? Nebraska was the unluckiest team last year in the Big Ten, maybe the entire country.
Best 3-9 team of all time.
Ever.
That's what people are saying at least.
Mm-hmm. Michigan State was, this is not because I'm a Michigan fan, but because of different, like Nebraska outgained them by over 100 yards, but because of turnover differential, whatever. Michigan State was the luckiest team in the Big Ten, maybe the whole country.
The 100 yards thing is deceiving because in the fourth quarter, Michigan State had a punt return for a touchdown, which is not counted in all 100 yards.
That's true, and they made the play and they won the game.
Mm-hmm.
That said, it was like, what in the world are you doing, Nebraska? They went the wrong way on the punt. The ball went the.
Was a trick play. They had two guys.
It's still, how many times does that work?
But
not many times.
It's like Nebraska. What were you thinking? Why would you fumble the ball when you have the game in your hands?
I'd say it's a little different
against Michigan.
But yeah, why would
when the forward
you...
progress was stopped?
Yeah, we've talked about that before. But I'm not saying that Michigan State was bad. Kenneth Walker was really, really good. Almost good enough to be a Heisman finalist. Almost good enough to be considered in the same breath as Aiden Hutchinson, but not. But I think the only reason I'm picking Michigan State instead of Wisconsin is because Wisconsin is in the West and they should have a better record simply because of who they play in the conference.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, Michigan State has a harder schedule than Wisconsin.
Wisconsin does
because of the division.
They do play the Buckeyes this year.
So does Michigan State.
Yeah.
Which unranked Big Ten team or teams will finish ranked?
Okay, speaking of Nebraska, I really badly wanted to pick them here, but I think the tough part is it's going to be an uphill battle all season because they were so bad last year. They're not getting any votes right now. Maybe they were getting one vote. Was that in the AP poll?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. They're not getting a ton of votes right now. They're not getting recognized. They do play Oklahoma, which if they won that, they would be ranked immediately. They won't win that. But then they play a handful of other games that I think, like, their schedule is not strong enough that they won't, like, where their schedule is strong, they'll lose those games, in my opinion. So as far as the uphill battle, I don't think they can work their way into being ranked. I do think they'll win a lot more games this year than last season, but
I think almost have to. I agree, but what scares me is they play Michigan. I think that Nebraska will kind of have a Purdue game or two where they pull off a big upset.
Well, that's what I kept predicting last year. I kept picking them like every week, and they just kept losing. Maybe I should just pick against them when they play Michigan.
Maybe you should.
But I ended up going with Penn State and Purdue. I think both of them won a lot of games. I think Penn State will beat Auburn, which I think after that, Auburn's not a ranked team, but they're an SEC school, and the AP poll and most polls respect the SEC, maybe not as much
they
as
could beat
we
Vanderbilt, and the media would be impressed because it's an SEC school.
I do think Penn State will go to Auburn and beat Auburn on the road, and I think they'll be ranked after that. And then they'll drop a couple games, but they'll win enough games to stay ranked by the end of the season. And then I think Purdue.
Next time we're gonna do more of a week by week, more in-depth predictions. We do have some predictions, but Michigan State, Penn State, end of the year. Who do you think wins?
Depends on who's at home. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
Yeah.
Oh well. Yeah, I picked.
If it's a close game, Michigan State for sure, because I mean, obviously they won a lot of close games last year, and James Franklin has a history of blowing close games. So
yeah. I didn't answer. Purdue. So they have a week out of conference schedule. They have a pretty favorable crossover schedule. More on that later.
Yeah.
But I'll just say this for now. Thankfully for Ohio State, they don't play them this year.
Yeah. Fun fact. I think. Oh, I gotta remember the fun fact. Delete this if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure Purdue is the only team with a winning record at home in the last since 2000, I think, against Ohio State.
Yeah.
In the Big Ten. Well, I was gonna say I remembered it will be at Penn State this year, so that does factor in a little bit. But I might still like the Spartans there just because James Franklin is James Franklin.
James Franklin is James Franklin,
yeah.
And James Franklin is not a good coach. So Ohio State, here's their schedule: at home against Notre Dame, Arkansas State, Toledo, Wisconsin, Rutgers. Then they finally go on the road at Michigan State, against Iowa, at Penn State, at Northwestern, against Indiana, at Maryland, hosting Michigan. What is your prediction for their season overall and then their record?
They're favored by double digits in all 12 of the games, and I'm with Vegas on this. They will be 12-0, and I don't think any of the games will be close. Penn State likes to play them close, but even if they do play them close, James Franklin's going to blow it.
Could be a whiteout
Especially,
game.
I'm expecting a whiteout game. And, other than that, they're not going to lose at home to any of these chump teams. They're not going to lose to Notre Dame. They play at Michigan State, but look at the last 2 times they played
They
Michigan State.
actually could have hung 100 on them.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago, it was 28-0 at halftime against Michigan State. Last year it was 49-0 against Michigan State. I think this year it's going to be 70-0 at halftime against Michigan State. Not really, but
that would be fun.
That'd be fun. So 12-0.
But so you say 12-0, but which team is most likely to beat Ohio State in the regular season?
So I don't think any team is likely to beat Ohio State in the regular season, but the team to keep it most likely to keep it close, Penn State, like I said.
Okay. All right. I think I predicted for Ohio State 11-1. For the team that's most likely to be that one, I think I've got to say the only team that they play this year that beat them last year.
Fair enough.
Michigan. Again, I'm not necessarily saying I think it will happen, but the most likely.
Yeah.
Even if it's a low percentage, which I'm also not saying it is. But biggest concern for Ohio State, what do you got?
You got to go to the defense, but it's really not that big of a concern for me. The defense and the
You've bought
linebackers.
big into Jim Knowles.
I have. He has said all the right things, and everybody else is saying the right things. The guys on the offense are saying that the defense is way better this year.
But they lost those receivers. What does that mean for the offense if they're struggling against the defense?
They lost those receivers, but then still put up how many passing yards against Utah in the Rose Bowl?
Oh, Utah.
Without those receivers? Utah's a top 10 team.
Yeah, they are. All right, continue.
Anyway, I said the defense / the linebackers. The linebackers were a huge part of why the defense was bad last year. I do think the linebackers will take a step up, and the defense, they might struggle week 1 against Notre Dame. They might give up some points, but then you got Arkansas and Toledo, and they'll have that scheme figured out by the time they get into Big Ten play. I don't think it'll matter in the Notre Dame game because Ohio State's offense is so good. But
and we don't know how good of a coach Marcus Freeman is.
Yeah, the only time he's ever coached, he blew a 21-point lead as a head coach. That'll be a really fun game, in my opinion. But I don't know if Notre Dame fans will agree. But yeah, defensive linebackers, but I really don't think it's that big of a concern. I do like Jim Knowles. Him at Oklahoma State, they improved significantly every year under him. Year 1, they were outside the top 100. And last year, if I'm not mistaken, they had the 5th-ranked defense in that was with 0 4-stars and 5-star players. You can check how many Ohio State has on their defense. It's not 0, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I agree. It has to be the defense, right? I know that you're super excited for Knowles. The offense should be fine.
Yeah.
But the defense wasn't good, and then they have a new coach, a new scheme. So even if Knowles ends up being good, my question is how long will it take? Thankfully for Ohio State, who's the first dangerous offense they play? Dangerous for them, maybe Wisconsin, just because they it might be similar to last year's Michigan if Ohio State is having the same issues.
Braylon Allen he is a very good running back.
But so unless it's that, even if he's good, the question will be how long does it take?
Yeah.
If he doesn't pan out, then in the defense anyways.
Yeah, honestly, even if he doesn't pan out, I see them being 11-0 going into the Michigan game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh dang, they should have played Purdue. So, Zach, what are you most excited for about Ohio State other than simply football being back?
I said, there's 3 guys that were extremely high recruits that were freshmen last year that got some playing time, but they didn't really make the impact that they wanted to play. I think they take a step up, and that is Jack Sawyer, JT Luamayama, and Tyleek Williams. Being year two, I think all 3 of them will, by the end of their career, will be absolute freaks. And I think year 2, you'll see that right off the bat. And Zach Harrison being back, that defensive line was another reason. That the defensive line wasn't what it had been with Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Chase Young. It was not what it had been last year with those guys. And I think they'll get back to that this year with those 3 guys there.
All right, so Michigan plays Colorado State, Hawaii, UConn, Maryland at Kinnick. which has been a problem for Michigan forever.
Mhm.
At Indiana, hosting Penn State, Michigan State. At Rutgers, hosting Nebraska and Illinois. And then finally at Ohio State. I predicted them to go 11-1.
Wow.
What do you got?
I think they will go 10-2. I think that they're not going to be great. They'll still be a good team. Their schedule is so easy. I really slim chance they don't get to 10 wins. But I do think they'll drop a loss before the Ohio State game, and then they will lose to Ohio State.
Okay. So since we already know the team most likely to beat Michigan in the regular season for you, who do you think the second loss is going to be? Do you have one?
I put Iowa. So the question was which team is most likely to beat Michigan.
Yeah.
I put other than Ohio State, Iowa / Michigan State. I do think it's funny that even when Michigan State sucked 2 years ago,
Michigan sucked 2 years ago too.
yeah, but we didn't know that at the time.
That's true.
Going into the game,
Which we could talk about preseason rankings, but
fun fact.
yeah.
It was Mel Tucker year 1. Michigan State was terrible. They lost no. Did they lose to Rutgers that year? They might have.
Michigan?
Michigan? No.
Michigan State lost, yeah.
Michigan State lost to Rutgers that year.
Mm-hmm.
They went and beat Michigan at Michigan with who's their quarterback? I don't even know.
Rocky Lombardi.
Yeah, Rocky Lombardi. Rocky Lombardi was throwing darts against Michigan because it's Mel Tucker and he doesn't lose to Michigan. Fun fact, I predicted that final score before the game. 27-24, I called it.
Great.
And everyone thought I was crazy, and then it was the exact final score.
Yeah. Most likely team to beat Michigan in the regular season. I only picked them to have one loss. I said Ohio State. Michigan obviously needs to get over the Mel Tucker Deepwater dog woodshed of mixed metaphors, whatever, hump. But I think that Michigan does that this year, and I think it's not even going to be close. So if you look over the last 10 years or so, whenever Michigan State has won, it's been pretty close. Or at least since Harbaugh has been there.
Yeah.
When Michigan's won, it's been by multiple scores. I think the closest one was the defeated with dignity game, and I could be wrong, but when Michigan was up by a lot and State scrapped and almost made it a game, but didn't.
Is that the one when Jabril Peppers had
he brought the 2-point conversion back?
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's got to be Ohio State. Who do you think is going to start at quarterback for Michigan?
I think snap 1, week 1, it'll be Cade. But I think they'll split all season, maybe most of the season, maybe all of the season. And I think if one player wins out and ends up starting and playing the whole game, they'll be on a very short leash.
Yeah.
Just because of what Cade's proved, and there's a lot of hype behind JJ. So even if JJ does take that starting job,
I
Cade will be right there.
I think Cade and JJ stay in a competition, and they're listed as or on the depth chart deeper into the season, in part because the schedule is hilarious. And then also Harbaugh loves trying to find every competitive advantage that he can. And so he's going to use them both. Some people I've read think that he's trying to get JJ ready for the Iowa game, except how is Iowa State in games? Turnovers. If J.J. McCarthy is explosive but more prone to turn the ball over, I could see them trying to keep Cade the starter through the Iowa game and then seeing what's going on.
Yeah, I could see that.
After that.
My thing is, the only time Ohio State's done this where they've had the two quarterbacks they couldn't decide was the year coming off the national championship. So it was their best year in a long time. This was Michigan's best year in a long time. They couldn't decide between J.T. Barrett and Cardinal Jones and ended up biting them in the end.
I don't remember how or if they split snaps, whatever. I do think that this is a little different because they split snaps last year and were successful. They've both talked about how they make each other better. It's all about the team. It's about getting wins. It's about getting to the national championship, they've said. So it's it's not Brady Henson. I don't think they're going to play one for a quarter, then one for a quarter, and then whoever's best in the second half. I think that they'll have a package for JJ until JJ's the starter, if he ever becomes the starter.
Do you think that JJ is Patrick Mahomes?
No, I think he's J.D. McCarthy.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah. Biggest concern for Michigan, it's got to be, for me at least, replacing Hutchinson and Ojabo. They probably won't just plug and play new defensive ends. They replace their production with, especially Hutchinson. But who predicted before the season last year that Ojabo would do what he did? Nobody at all. So I think
did Ojabo do in part what he did last year because Hutchinson was so good?
maybe. He also, I mean, the NFL didn't think so. He tore his ACL and they still took him second round. I think Ojabo was good, and I think he was better maybe than you're giving him credit for, but he still was a second round pick on an ACL.
I wasn't saying my opinion, I was just speculating.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, maybe, but even still, I think people are exaggerating the loss a little too much. Like, that's not sarcastic. I think, honestly, just a little too much because, for some reason, some people think Michigan's D-line will suck, even though it's maybe been the most consistent position under Harbaugh. In his 7 years, they've had 11 defensive linemen drafted, a number of them in the top 3 rounds. But
I have a question.
Yeah.
So it's been the most consistent position. You said that, defensive line. How does it feel that like maybe one year the defensive line's been better than Ohio State's, and that's been the most consistent position?
I don't really care.
All right, this is
Yeah. I mean, we have talked before about how Harbaugh wasn't born on third and had to rebuild the program, where Ryan Day walked into a pretty cushy 5-star pay-for-player deal. But I don't think Michigan just seamlessly replaces the guy who set the record for sacks in a season for Michigan.
Right.
But I also think the defense is going to look more like Baltimore's defense than it did last year, which is part of the reason why they brought in the guy that they did to run the defense, because he was in Baltimore with Mike McDonald.
Yeah.
So I think they're hoping the production comes from a variety of places more than just their defensive ends this year like last year.
The other question I have is, so they can't replace a superstar like Aiden Hutchins seamlessly, like per se, like Ohio State did with Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Chase Young.
Who'd they have last year? Sometimes sometimes the well runs dry. I don't think, like, I'm not saying they won't have a star. I'm saying they're not going to have someone set the record for sacks in the season.
My question is, maybe the defense being really good last year was more of a credit to that the defensive line was so good. Maybe the linebackers and secondary weren't as good as they looked because the defensive line was so good and getting in there so fast and making so many plays. That's the only thing I would be concerned about, as far as like if they go from an A+ D line to a B+ D line, maybe that makes the whole defense go from an A to a B-.
Possibly. I do think the corners are going to be better than they were last year. I also think they're going to mix where the pressure is coming from. Last year they didn't blitz a whole bunch because they just had Hutchinson and Ojabo.
They didn't really need to.
They didn't need to, but they also can now, where the first year, what I had read was that Mike McDonald was slow implementing it, in part because he had Hutchinson, but then in part because it takes time to implement the system, which again is why they brought him in to run it. But yeah, I don't know. Adam, what are you most excited for about Michigan season?
Wait, aren't I supposed to answer what?
Oh yeah, you didn't answer that. My bad.
I mean, I said basically the same thing, but the other thing that I think that I'm most concerned for Michigan would be them losing both of their coordinators. I think that is more significant a loss than people make it out to be. Like, it's not all on the head coach to make the team great. You have to have great coordinators. When teams win the national championship, their coordinators get head coaching jobs for a reason.
I will. Well, the only pushback, because Mike McDonald I loved. I was thinking about him if Harbaugh ended up leaving.
Yeah.
That was never going to happen, but I didn't know that at the time. But I loved Mike McDonald. People thought of him as like basically a really good up-and-coming coach that was like a genius, especially with play calling stuff. Are we still sold that they had a good offensive coordinator? I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but his best season by far was the most Harbaugh offense there.
Yeah, well, he doesn't agree with you. Josh Gaddis doesn't.
I know Josh Gaddis doesn't agree with me. He's taken to Twitter to defend himself against random people.
Yeah.
Which, whatever. Like I feel like you should be busier in Miami, but whatever. He doesn't, and he has had fights with a lot of people.
You don't have to be busy when you play in the ACC.
You do when you're taking over Miami. Anyway, so I'm most excited for the offense because I hope it's way more explosive. Harbaugh said that they're going to pass more, which last year he said, oh, we're going to run the ball and run the ball and run the ball. And fans are like, he better be lying. Harbaugh doesn't really lie. Mm-hmm. He has some, like I said with the quarterbacks, he wants competitive advantage, but that's mainly omission. This time he says, we're going to pass the ball more. We have a lot of good receivers, tight ends, whatever. They have Donovan Edwards who can catch the ball. Blake Corum is really fast. He said they're going to pass the ball more. So I hope they pass it more. I hope the running game is a little more explosive. Simply because, I love Tassan Haskins. He's gone. Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum are not going to do the same grind it out, smash you in the face football.
Yeah. So
if they're running the ball, hopefully it's more explosive and they get some longer runs. Mm-hmm. I'm also hoping the culture change was real and not just linked to Aiden Hutchinson. Like he got him over the hump. He pulled him in for extra lifts and all this stuff. So hopefully it was a real thing. They're talking about it still, about how they have a great culture and whatever, but we'll see.
Yeah, your chair's really squeaky.
Yeah. Big Ten championship prediction.
Well, we obviously have the same team from the East because everyone else does. Just kidding. I have Ohio State in the Big Ten championship this year. In the East, who do you have?
I'll be real. I want to be confident in Michigan. I do think now that Ohio State is beatable, where I didn't most of last season. Like it's documented from this show that I didn't think it was going to happen. Now I think Michigan specifically could beat Ohio State. I also think it's more likely that Ohio State pulls off the upset and beats Michigan for the first time since 2019.
Upset, favored by 2 touchdowns.
Sometimes Vegas is drunk.
Sometimes.
Yeah. I'd think about, I'll get to it. I'd think about Iowa in the West, except the crossover games are against Michigan and Ohio State, which is just not fair.
It's brutal.
It's a brutal draw. Purdue plays at home against Penn State in week 1, and then at Indiana in their last game. How great would it be if Ohio State is breathing a sigh of relief because they don't have to play Purdue, but then have to play them in the Big Ten championship game?
Yeah.
That would be great. But for real, I'm going to pick Michigan over Purdue.
Wow. I went through the West, and I'm like, who the heck do I go with here? And I got to go with, I think this is finally the year that PJ Fleck does. He has his best year at Minnesota. They got a lot of guys coming back. Hopefully, Ibrahim is healthy, and I think Minnesota will make it to the Big Ten championship, but get absolutely smacked by Ohio State.
I think if Minnesota is in the Big Ten championship game, they will get smacked by Indiana. If Indiana's in the Big Ten championship game.
I don't know about that, but
I just don't think. I think PJ Fleck is kind of on James Franklin's level.
Roll the boat. Well, James Franklin won a Big Ten championship.
Mm-hmm.
So why can't PJ Fleck?
When was that?
2016? 2016. Fact check me. That was off the top of my head.
Big Ten Player of the Year prediction.
This was the easiest question that you put on here.
Hold on 3. 1, 2, 3. CJ Stroud. As long as he stays healthy.
Yeah.
And by that I mean he only plays in 50-degree weather or warmer.
The hard part is CJ Stroud might not be padding the stats because he's only going to be playing he can only be playing half of each game.
That's true. Although Ryan Day might have something, he might want to run it up more. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
I doubt it.
Okay.
Yeah.
CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I mean it's just easy. When you come back and you have all those weapons out wide receiver, the offensive line is going to be great again. You have Travion Henderson, you got Mayan Williams, you got Marvin.
I could also see Jackson Smith and Jigba, to be honest.
Yeah, I could see.
But all the yards he gets, Stroud also gets. So.
True, and I think that I don't know if Jackson Smith and Jigba had almost 1,600 receiving yards last year. I do not think he'll repeat that just because he'll be the number one guy and there'll be a little more focus on him. And I think Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka and Julian Fleming, and the list goes on and on. Guys will take receiving yards from him a little bit because it's not a three-man show this year like it was last year with Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and JSN. The depth that we'll use this year is a little bit different than last year. Yeah. So I think it'll eat into his yards.
Zach, who do you think is going to make the playoff? Who do you think will win the national title?
I think so. Should I just start with 4 and go down, or
I didn't number mine.
Should I start with 1?
Sure.
Okay, so I think the AP poll got 1 through 3 right. It'll be Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia as the 1, 2, and 3 seed in that order. Then I think the 4 seed, a little bit of a shocker. A shocker. I think that they have one of the best offensive lines and defensive lines in the country this year. I think Baylor, they don't have a tough schedule. I think they will go 13-0 and win the Big 12, and they'll be in the playoff.
That's a good pick.
Yeah.
I picked Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State.
Wow.
2 from the Big Ten.
I can see that. But Ohio
I
State's
think
gonna beat Michigan. So.
Georgia takes a big step back. They lost an all-time defense. I'm not saying they're going to be bad.
Yeah.
But they lost an insane defense. And I love USC's schedule, and I like Lincoln Riley. I picked USC. I picked Bama to win.
I don't trust USC's offensive line yet. Lincoln Riley's going to have to recruit a year or 2 before I think they get over that edge. But then they go to the Big Ten, and I think it's even tougher.
The only thing is for USC this year, what great defense do they play?
Utah.
Okay.
Utah will beat them.
Okay.
Utah's a team that has shown up in a lot of people's playoff predictions I've seen is the Utes.
Yeah, not a believer in Utah.
I'm not either, to be honest, but
we're gonna switch to basketball.
Oh, I didn't say my national champion.
Oh yeah, who's your national champion?
My national champion is Ohio State over Bama. Who's your national champion?
Alabama.
There you go.
Gosh dang it.
Dang.
I just want Nick Saban to retire.
Yeah.
And then they can hire Rich Rodriguez like they should have done in the 2000s. We're going to switch to basketball. In a couple weeks, we'll be back to preview the upcoming games. Back on our normal schedule of every single week. What were you going to say?
I wanted to ask the basketball question.
Feel free.
Okay, so reports say that Bronny James is being recruited by 5 teams, including both the Buckeyes and the Wolverines. This is a question for you specifically. I guess I can answer it too. Do you think it helps or hurts Michigan's chances that they have the worst recruiting class in the Big Ten currently?
Yeah, if there's one single thing in my life that I have zero worries about, it's Michigan basketball recruiting.
Yeah?
I did actually read, though, that Michigan is not actually pursuing Bronny James. I also, if there's one sport that I feel fine about recruiting-wise, it's Michigan basketball.
Did you see the poster he had? Was that last night, I think?
Yeah, I did.
That was pretty awesome.
It was good.
Did you see what Skip Bayless said?
No.
He said that your dad would have dunked it with his right hand or left hand or whatever the opposite hand was, so he's criticizing a child, but on which hand to dunk with.
That's your fault for listening to Skip Bayless.
What? I don't even follow him on Twitter. People just were roasting him for even saying the comment. But
Okay, that's fair. If you could choose any 3 current college football coaches for your zombie apocalypse team, which 3 would you choose, Zach?
If we took off the word current from this question, I would immediately pick Woody Hayes, but he's not.
He's dead.
Yeah, he's also,
He'd be one of the zombies.
Okay, but if we could pick dead or alive.
You could go back in time,
to
grab a guy to bring him back.
Yeah, into the zombie apocalypse.
He'd punch throats.
Yeah, he'd punch throats. And he wouldn't get bit because he's punched him in the throat. No, my first choice is Mario Cristobal. He knows a lot of martial arts. He's basically a badass. And he has won 2 national championships. I think he's a winner. And I think that's great to have on the team. My second pick is Sam Pittman, solely because I know for a fact I'm faster than him. If we end up being chased down, I do not want to be the slowest guy in the crew. My third pick is Mike Leach, simply because you need someone with a little crazy in them. He might have a little bit more than a Poco Loco in him to make the hard decisions, to make those decisions and execute those decisions that might be tough.
What's great is I think that if Mike Leach was asked this question, he would answer it.
Yeah, I do think
and I if you're out there and you have any connection at all to Mike Leach,
Yeah.
please ask him which 3 current head football coaches in college he would choose for the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah.
And we will tweet this at you as well, Michael. I picked PJ Fleck. I don't think he's a great coach, but
Okay.
he does have a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Seems like a guy who works out a lot. I don't know. Speaking of works out a lot, Brent Venables seems like he has just enough twingy craziness. I don't know. He feels like a bomb about to explode.
Yeah.
He'd be great.
Yeah.
And then, similar to your Sam Pittman, I got Brett Bielema. Not just because I know for a fact that I'm faster than him, but also because I think he'd have some fight in him until he went down.
Yeah, I agree, Sam. I think that's Sam Pittman will have that too. Yeah.
So those are my 3: Brett Bielema, PJ Fleck, and Brent Venables.
I picked 2 Big Ten coaches. I picked 0. So it shows how loyal I am.
Yeah. You didn't pick Ryan Day.
You didn't pick Jim Harbaugh.
I did pick Jim Harbaugh, and then I took him off.
Yeah.
Only I picked PJ Fleck over him, just because Harbaugh's getting a little older. He just had like hip or knee surgery or something.
He eats his boogers. You don't want somebody on your team that eats their boogers.
He's resourceful. Maybe I do want that.
Hey, if
Or you're just saying you could eat their boogers because they won't have eaten them.
Yeah, because I eat
That makes
boogers.
sense. Well, that's it for now.
Yeah.
We will see you in 2 weeks as we get ready for every week being back. Can't believe college football is almost finally here. Like, subscribe, follow, all that. Be sure next time you're at the grocery store, look for Lano Life chicken broth or beef broth. They have a bunch of different flavors, a bunch of different kinds, including keto, which is the one that I drink. The keto chicken broth is just incredible. Be sure to check them out, follow them on social media and all that stuff. But until next time, go blue.
Go Buckeyes.